Bristol 5th District State Representative Patricia Haddad has finished a distinguished career on Beacon Hill. Now, how does Act 2 look? That's our topic this afternoon on Off the Record.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice of you to have me. It's interesting being a has-been, but it's also, there's something very heartwarming about people still wanting to talk about things that went on. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your career.
Oh, my goodness, my career. I go back to a long time ago being a middle school teacher. And I always would joke that there is something in those skills that you learn being a middle school teacher that really helps you to be in politics. A lot of egos and a lot of people who, truly have a mindset of they have things that they want to do and not necessarily get to them in the right place. So having taught 7th and 8th graders, it's the same thing. They have a plan, they know where they're going, and sometimes you'll go, why are you going that way? Mm-hmm. So I did that for many years. And then I worked with my husband in a small business. So it was really eye-opening because you go from being a teacher where you're paid every 2 weeks faithfully to working in your own small business when your husband says, don't cash your check until we see what else clears. So it's, it was a good mix of different kinds of opportunities that helped me when I decided, okay, I think that when I left teaching, I couldn't really stay away, and I was on the school committee for many years. And then along came the special election when Joe Menard decided to run for the open seat that was vacated by Tom Norton. And we had known each other since the teaching years because she taught in Somerset. She was the special needs coordinator. I was a teacher. So we knew each other. And I had, frequently been part of her campaigns. And she said to me, are you willing to work? I'd like to go for this open seat. And I'll never forget walking into my husband's office and saying, look, I'm going to take a sabbatical. Now, remember, I had been on the school committee, so I was spending a lot of time on the telephone. So my husband said to me, why? And I said, well, Joan's going to run for the Senate and I'm going to run for state rep. And all he said to me was, will you get paid? And I said, yes, I will. He said, go right ahead. Because it wasn't getting much work out. So, and that was how I got into running for state rep. And I have to tell you, the Fall River delegation, even back then, going back to 2001, such interesting, incredible people. Dave Sullivan, Phil Travis, Mike Rodricks, Bob Correa, Joan. And I'm telling you, it was great because they really introduced me to people. So I take credit for being coachable. I moved up because I listened to people, and I knew that, as Bob Correa one day said to me, no matter what the job, no matter how awful it is, say yes. Okay. Because then people knew you were willing to work. So I moved rather quickly into being the chair of the Joint Committee on Education on the House side, and we did some really great things around special needs, and we tweaked the formula. So that was great. And then when Bob DeLeo became the speaker, he moved me into leadership immediately. And I started out as the assistant whip, which is the same position that Joan held. So it was very funny because she was on the education committee, she was the assistant whip. We followed each other through offices, and each of us redecorated. So we'd clean the curtains, and so people would want our offices after we left them. And from there I went into being actually the first woman to be the Speaker Pro Tem. It was such an honor, and because when I was the chair of education, Bob DeLeo was the chair of Ways and Means, we had developed a relationship that he trusted that I wasn't going to embarrass anybody and that I was going to do the work that would be required for any policy changes or anything that we were going to do would be well thought out and have lots of backup. And he I'm not going to say free rein, but like he trusted me. He trusted that, when I went to him and said, the whole coal industry is falling apart, and we've got to be nimble, and we've got to be flexible, and we've got to be ready to get into the next thing, because Deval had started the ball rolling on no coal, and then trying to get rid of gas, which is still, in my opinion, a mistake. We need natural gas. So when I walked into the office one day when Deval was putting out a big, I shouldn't call him Deval, Governor Patrick was putting out a big piece of energy legislation that was going to change things. It left the South Coast totally out. Totally out. He was talking about bringing in hydropower from Canada, and nothing that was going to be helpful to us. We were at the end of every pipeline. We were at the end of the oil, the gas, you name it, we were at the end. So everything costs more down here because of that. And so I went into the speaker and I said, look, I can't let this bill go through. It's going to hurt us. And of course, I was very fortunate. The New Bedford and the Fall River delegation, we all came together, and we said, this is going to hurt us. If you disregard the fact that, again, we'll be at the end of the hydropower line, our cost, everything is going to be a problem. And he listened, and he said, well, all right, go do the work. So we stopped that bill from going through, which was something I had never done in my life, stopped something. It was a little nerve-wracking because, I'm saying to the governor, no, I'm not going to do what you want. And he at one point sent somebody to tell me that he was going to play hardball, and I answered with, yes, I know how to play hardball, and by the way, I'll be here in January, and you won't. So I was fresh, and so I spent the entire summer of that year bringing in the people that never talked to anybody. We talked about hydropower. We talked about tidal energy. We talked about solar. We talked about wind. We talked about all of the things that were going to fill in the blank of coal and hopefully get us out of being so dependent on natural gas. And so it was very interesting because, here I am, the rep from Somerset. So Somerset had almost 19,000 people. I had a part of Swansea, around 18,000 people. Dighton had 6,000 people. So I was like this little, person over here. And I sent out invitations literally all over the world and said, come and talk to me. Talk to me about alternative energies and how Massachusetts can fit into this alternative energy. And we used the library in Somerset. So people came from England, from Denmark, from Spain. It was the most amazing.
Wow.
And it was Tony Cabral, myself, and our staffs. And we would have a 2-hour session in the morning and a 2-hour session in the afternoon. And people came in, we asked them for a brief, 2-page brief. And then we would give them 2 hours to just talk to us. Just tell us everything you want us to know. And people are furiously, taking notes and listening. Then we sent out 10 questions to everybody who would come to speak with us. And, some of them they could answer, some of them they couldn't. But they were all about, what you think you can bring to Massachusetts. And, pretty specifically the South Coast. But we were being very general. And then we told them, when they came for the 2-hour, bring any ancillary materials, whether it's pie charts, whatever you have, bring it. So we thought we were going to be collecting a little bit of information. It turned out to be 3-inch 3-ring binders.
Wow.
And so when the session started up in January, we had Charlie Baker new. He had a whole new group of people. We had a new chairman of Ways and Means, a new chairman of TUE, and I would make an appointment, and I would walk in with my 3 3-ring binders, and people go, oh my God. Some of them tried to give them back to me. No, I can't, I don't want them. But it was all here's the framework. Here's what I did. So now you can just read the briefs and then bring those same people in and see what their story is now, see if they're telling you the same truths and everything. And in the meantime, we were writing a bill. And a lot of good people helped me write that bill, because I'm not taking any credit for writing the bill. I just said, this is what we think we want. Put it into legalese. So that bill was filed and actually passed in one session, which is unheard of.
Tell us what the bill was about.
Okay, so the name of the bill was diversifying, diversifying feedstock or diversifying? Everybody wanted it to be clean energy. They wanted it to be wind. No. I believe, and still believe, that it's not good to just have one thing. So it was to diversify our energy production. And so that, in that bill was hydro, wind, solar, and battery storage, which we don't talk about very much, but has kind of taken on taken a good turn into what we're doing. So that was, where we were going. Let's talk about making changes, but not to the detriment of anybody. We didn't want to put anybody out of business. We brought in fishermen because we were, concerned about how they felt about everything. It was an amazing process. And so it did ultimately end up with a bill, a process where bids were sent out to developers asking for long-term contracts to provide the feedstock, just like they were doing in the gas industry, just like they had done for many, many years in the coal industry. What can you give us as a price for a kilowatt of power? And we put a lot of guardrails around it, because I don't know if any of your listeners or you remember that there had been this project called the wind project off the coast of the Cape, and it wasn't going to work. It was too expensive, it didn't make sense, it upset many people. We wanted to go way, way out, 15 miles out, so that there shouldn't be any problem with looking at it. And the wind out there is incredible. It never stops blowing.
It's constant, yeah.
It's constant wind. So those developers came forward. And as I said, we put guardrails so that we weren't going to let the prices escalate, because that's what always happens. We were really pushing hard. And the governor at the time, I think, pushed a little too hard, because he left out a big piece of the bill. And what the bill, in the vision of the New Bedford and Fall River people was that the developers, in addition to giving us a low price, were also going to have to contribute to the economy. We were trying to start a whole new industry. And and we talked very often about the supply chain and how, sure, the wind was a big deal, and building the wind farm was a big deal. But the real jobs and the real money and the real product was going to be creating that new industry, which included all of the, making the blades, making the turbines, making the cable. Charlie and we didn't see eye to eye on that. He was all about the low price. I get it, except that we left a lot of jobs and money on the table that went to Rhode Island and New Hampshire and New York and New Jersey, and that was a little tough to take. So that kind of gets us to, if I'm rambling, just shut me down.
We'll let you know. You're doing good.
Okay,
Keep going.
all right. I'm filling your time. So that brought us to then, things starting to happen. And, we had built that great marine terminal in New Bedford. But we knew that was going to, we were going to grow out of that pretty quickly. So New Bedford was getting some good things. Some good things were happening around them. But the vision was that it was going to grow into other places. So Fall River, Somerset, Salem, we all had ports. that were not being used to their full capacity. And so the vision was that each would grow its own piece of this industry. And again, Charlie didn't see it that way, which was just, it was difficult. One of the people that we worked very closely with was Mayor Mitchell, New Bedford Mayor Mitchell. He was the writer, so I'd say to him, John, we need to put this letter together because, phys ed, if it wasn't on the scoreboard, I didn't get it. I knew what I wanted to say, but I wanted him to say it really nice. So he was great. Every time we needed to, put something very strong together. And then, of course, we'd all damp him down because he does get excited. But he was so great in the process. And I'm very happy for all that has happened in New Bedford because that was the vision, that we would all continue to grow.
Now, what came out of that was the first commercially licensed wind farm off the coast of Martha's Vineyard that was supposed to have 62 turbines.
Yep.
And now we had the incident last summer where one of the turbines broke.
Broke. Sure.
Yeah.
And now we have a situation where basically permitting is ended for a while, which this movement went through once before and now is going through it again. So in the wake of what happened with Prysmian, can you get them back 3-4 years from now, or is that ship sailed?
No, I refuse to believe that the ship has sailed. Okay. I believe that it may not happen at the speed that we were hoping. We always set 2030 as a goal. That's probably not going to happen. But I don't think it's dead. I think that there are more people who understand that we cannot be dependent on one source of energy fuel, whether it be, water, gas, whatever, that we have to look at as many pieces as we can. So I think that it's on hold, and everything evolves. There are fits and starts, and yes, this current administration doesn't believe in wind, but I still believe in it. And as people said to me last summer when all of this happened with the blade, what a tragedy, and this week I think has been the anniversary of the Exxon Valdez. That was a tragedy. Wildlife, people's lives. The blades were,
you go there now. You kick a rock and you can see. I've been there.
And that was an inconvenience. Yes, a blade, whatever you want to, and yes, people were inconvenienced by that, but that was a tragedy. Is wildlife being killed? It was an inconvenience, and you learn a lesson and you go on.
Right.
You don't shut down everything because of one blade. So I guess I'm trying to say we have to be more patient, and we have to understand that you got to be respectful of other people's opinions, whether you like them or not. And when they're in power, they get to, ram their opinions through, and we have to.
And Somerset still has one of the biggest areas of land that could be developed.
Absolutely.
Not only in Massachusetts, very likely in New England.
East Coast.
Okay. And it's just there.
Yeah.
It's owned by a company in suburban St. Louis that kind of shivved Somerset.
That's kind.
Back, yeah.
No.
But if you remember how they introduced themselves and what we know now, where we've had all these instances of everything from salt to scrap metal to you name it.
Yeah. I don't. They are not allowed to. Well, as I left office, they hadn't been allowed to call me for over a year. I wouldn't answer their calls because you only get to lie to me once. Because I figure if I catch you, you've lied to me before. And they made promises they had no intention of keeping, never mind break. They had no intention of even keeping them. They said what people wanted to hear. And it's been a huge disappointment for the town. And whether I agree with the neighbors or not, I feel for them. That they were lied to, just like I was lied to. But, you can't fix that. Now you got to go forward, and you've got to now look for people who are not going to lie, who have a reputation. If we had known how many subsidiaries and been able to investigate that, well, we didn't.
Well, they were doing things basically without going to the Board of Selectmen in Somerset.
Of course.
And it's like, yeah, well, we set it up. It's our property. Deal with it. And I think the latest number from the Herald News is a story that Joe covered, and it continues. Something like 11,000 separate violations.
Yes.
That's still being adjudicated.
Yes, which I'm very glad that they're not giving up on it, because somebody's got to say, no, we don't care that you have a lot of money. You're wrong, and you need to be, you need to make restitution for what you did. But it's, when you have companies that preceded them that were ethical, good business people, regardless of whether their business was not, the most attractive, they knew their shortcomings and tried to at least ameliorate the issues that were
But
just
one of the
natural
things that
around
always interested me when people started coming down from Cambridge and Norton and suburban Boston and basically told people locally, well, whatever happens, happens. Once Montauk closed and Brayton Point closed, they really didn't care what would happen to the local tax structure.
No, not at all.
And you had to create, along with Mike Roderick's, the whole issue of Reggie dollars, which apparently your successor is now trying to revive in the legislature from having talked to him. And that's a whole nother story, really.
So the Reggie funds came from fees, not necessarily penalties, but fees that were paid by the coal-fired plants. And that's why we could make the argument that Brayton Point in particular had paid really a good, maybe the majority of fees into that. And so the Reggie funds, although they were supposed to be for things like electrifying, the cars and the grid, and also incentives for people to be more economical with their power use, there is no what's the right thing? There's no dedicated source going into that fund anymore. So it's not going to be recapitalized, because it would have to be recapitalized not by the taxpayers. That money never came from taxpayers. That came from businesses. So I don't see any possible way to recapitalize that fund. And what is left is going to people who buy hybrid or electric cars. And again, create more efficient, energy efficient homes. So, sorry, but I don't see that, because the only place it could come is from the taxpayers, and I don't see that as a viable option. Asking our taxpayers to pay more money for individual.
What's going on with Montauk these days?
So it's owned by a gentleman who has had a lot of good ideas. The cleanup is going to be quite extensive, and he has been doing it slowly. I think he has plans. It's hard to get a developer. I mean, he is a developer, but he's more of a, he does cleanup and things like that. But to bring a developer now, any developers, into Somerset, particularly, I'll just use Somerset, where it is implied that they're not interested in having businesses come. We're scaring off a lot of businesses. At one point, I had 5 businesses to go down to the point, 5. Very early in the process, one came to me and said, I'm really sorry, I don't have the ability to fight. Family business, great, would have been a great family business. Then, of course, we've had both Ørsted and South Coast Wind on hold, because they don't know where they're going. They were to plug in, which was not going to be a lot of jobs, but it would have been good tax money. And then, of course, Prismium. And Prismium, being a multinational company with an impeccable reputation, it was very disheartening to see that people, because they had been burnt, I get it, they had been burnt by CDC, they couldn't believe that anything that Prismian was saying. It was just really hard. And there's no other way to describe it other than, when you're burnt, it's really hard to trust. And as upset as I am with them, I have to understand that I lived at one point, well, for most of my married life, I lived 9/10 of a mile from Montauk. Now, nothing to the degree of what was going on at Brayton Point, but never had a clothesline, never opened the windows on the south side of the house. And whenever we had the house restained, we had to do the south side more than, because we were on the prevailing winds from Montauk. We would go down, because we were on the river. I remember my kids bringing pieces of coal back up from playing in the river, Nothing compared to what they were going through, but it was an annoyance, And so, again, I wanted them to be more understanding, but I don't live there, so I'm not going to, as much as we want to judge things, I don't live there, and I can't say for certain what they were really, what was really.
But you still have the tax base issue.
Oh, I heard recently, and I think this is the correct number, that 88% of the tax base now comes from the residents. It's a lot of money.
It was a lot more than they were used to paying.
Right, and when you look at the graying community that we live in, used to be about 15% of the population used the schools. I'm not even sure if that's the correct number anymore.
And what's interesting too, since you brought that up, is I remember when they opened the Somerset Berkeley Regional High School, and there was a fear that it wasn't big enough.
Right.
Now suddenly, I think they've got 900 students.
Right,
and
we had lobbied for 1,000 plus, and I think they ultimately built it for just around 900.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's okay. It's it's working well. It's a beautiful school. Things are going well. And people look at the new middle school and think, that's huge. It's actually smaller than the original middle school.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's smaller. And because it's built on a hill, 3 levels. So it looks really big, but it's not. And that, they can't even open up the gym for a full court basketball because I think there was an error made, but I don't want to.
Well, actually, they kind of fixed that.
Did they finally fix that? Yeah. Oh, I haven't been in a while.
Kind of fixed, yeah. But the other thing is, too, they're trying to preserve the elementary schools by putting in new windows and things like that, because they know there is no appetite now to build anything else.
No.
There's not going to be for a while.
One of the things that we did before I left, because I was very fortunate to be on the Ways and Means Committee, we created a new department or whatever within the school buildings for, instead of, the way school buildings was set up originally was complete replacement. And then we realized that there were really a lot of buildings that were in decent shape. So now within the school buildings, there is a division for roofs, windows, and HVAC, air quality. So Somerset has gotten into that program in order to replace windows at the North, which is now the North Elementary, which was the North Middle, where I spent 12 years of my life. So those, we'll replace them at a significantly lower cost.
Now Swansea is in the pipeline as well.
To do a new school, yeah. And they need it. They need it. I mean, they haven't built a new school in a very long time. But, getting back to Somerset, the South School is in really good shape. It was, I hate to say this, but it was built in the days when it mattered. The buildings were going to last. Chase is good. It's not great, but it's good. And so fixing things makes far more sense than replacing. And then you keep the, I love the character of the small, South Elementary. It's just a nice place. And North is a great place. My kids ended up going there for most of their elementary, when it turned into the elementary school. So, you know, the bones of the buildings are good. So why are we talking about replacing them? Why aren't we just continuing to take care of them? And I think that's what people want. I think there's still an appetite for neighborhood schools.
They're going away, though.
Isn't it sad?
And I live in Tiverton. They're closing down.
Yeah.
And we saw what happened in Fall River. They built millions of dollars worth of new elementary and middle schools. They have pretty much paid those off, but there's still the question of how do you pay for Fall River's share of a new Diamond Regional Technical High School and also pay for the new BMC Durfee High School.
And the same thing that is happening on what used to be both ends of my district, because Bristol Plymouth was also building. And Bristol Aggie has gone through, but we did it differently at Bristol Aggie. We were very lucky because when that process started, I brought down then superintendent and not superintendent, I'm sorry, Commissioner Chester, and showed Commissioner Chester that an Aggie school is very different from a Voc Tech school. And so fortunately, they allowed Bristol Aggie, when the amount of money was allotted, they allowed them much more flexibility in using that money. And then at the time, then Senator Pacheco, myself, and Senator Rodericks, who's a very big supporter of the school, were also able to put together a package of grant money. So that amount might have been, I don't know, it might have been 30 million. I don't recall the exact amount. But anyway, what that meant was that it could be then not distributed, but used proportionally by all of the sending communities. So the debt service for that school is much lower than it might have been. And if anybody's been there lately, it's amazing what they've done. It's a true campus. And UMass Amherst is looking at it for part of their extension courses.
Really?
I know people make fun of Fall River. I grew up in Fall River. I make fun of Fall River. But the fact of the matter is that it's a good place to live. The greater Fall River area, the greater New Bedford, greater Taunton. We have people who have worked hard and believe, and right now we're going through a weird period where we don't know whether we're on foot or horseback because we don't know what's going on. But for the most part, I think people want to be supportive of the schools, of the communities. It's just hard. When you aren't secure in your housing or your food or anything, it's very hard. But I get angry with people when they want to talk about us in a bad way.
How do you react when people in Fall River basically say, well, we shoulder this burden regarding affordable housing, and Westport and Swansea and Somerset and Berkeley and Dighton and on and on and on don't?
It's true. It's true. There's no getting away from it. But part of the reason is that we don't have the transportation infrastructure. Now, Swansea's working hard at that because they now have free busing, free bus, Serta bus. We've got to make a bigger effort to connect so that, some people don't want to have a car. I mean, I find that amazing, but some people don't want to have a car. Some people are one-car families and several people moving around. Until we start doing better with public transportation, until we start doing better with how you get to the services that you need, the courts. And no, maybe everybody doesn't use the courts, but at some point, I had to go to the registry of deeds. If there's no way to get there, and I'm not making, this is not an excuse, but it is the reason that some of the communities are using in order not to fulfill their obligation. I don't think that's a good thing, but I can't argue with it either until you have that ability to get around.
Speaking of getting around, we have this thing now called South Coast Rail, which is running as we speak.
Isn't it?
Have you been on it yet?
I was able to go on one of the safety runs. Oh my goodness, 79 miles an hour. Zzz. I didn't feel well, and the weather was, but former Senator Menard and I were also invited. I'm dying to get on it. The Herald did a very interesting, I know you people don't work with them anymore, but the train versus the car.
Yes.
Did you see it? I thought
see
it was a great article.
Train beat him, right?
Train beat him. Yeah. Train beat him.
Well, Joe and I can talk all we want about driving to Boston and
to court.
me navigating and you driving. And
yeah, I wish I'd
It's not fun.
No.
Well, years ago, when I was first stringing, I was stringing for the Standard Times and Associated Press. Associated Press was on Milk Street. You couldn't email stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
I know.
It took
And there's
from
no
my
parking,
house-
and there's no nothing.
Yep. Took from my house where I had my dark room to there, an hour and 10 minutes. Same trip now is 2.5. And you're fighting traffic most of the way.
It's rough.
So taking the train to Boston is like way better.
Yeah.
Plus gas, finding parking. When you do find it, $30 usually.
Oh, you're lucky if you get a
Yeah.
$30 day.
I know all the cheap ones up there.
You know the cheap ones?
Yeah. It's crazy.
You know, I don't know. People don't know this, and I'm sure they don't really care. But we had a parking space. That was one of the perks. Taxed on it.
You were taxed on your parking space?
That's right. Because it was a perk.
Oh.
So people go, oh, they gave you a parking space. No, it wasn't given, and it was several $1,000s. And I know nobody cares about that.
now, is that through the Governor's Council?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Probably. They just take it out of your pay. You don't
They
even
do
know
get a
it's
parking
gone.
space.
You do get a parking space.
Yeah.
But you don't even know. I
It's
mean,
like
just-
gold in Boston. So
because the only reason I knew, because when it filters through all those little boxes, half of the time you don't know what they're taking it for. It's just gone, whether you like it or not. And I had a staff person who was traveling, and I said, so can I get a parking space for them? Oh, sure, and it's going to cost X. And I went, what do you mean it's going to cost X? Yeah, your parking space is taxed. We charge tax on it. So I paid, the tax to get them the parking space. But it's very funny that those are big perks. You know that in Boston, to get a parking space.
let's go back to Brayton Point.
Sure, sorry.
Future. What do you think is
Future.
going to happen?
Oh, God. I would like to hope and think and pray that there are still people out there looking and realizing the opportunities that are available there. It's still a deep water port. If the state would take it and work it, that would be great. Because regardless of what Charlie Baker said, there are 12 acres there that belong to the state of Massachusetts. And that includes that dock. And when that was sold, it never should have been conveyed to CDC. And, Charlie, if you're listening, you lied to me. He kept saying, oh, no, we don't own it, we don't own it, we don't own it. And then one of the neighbors made a FOIA request. And the message didn't get down to the poor underling attorney who answered and said, oh, yes, the state does own it. Oh, I was just ripping. So, but now it's, will CDC sue if the state it's just a mess. It's a complete mess that never, ever should have been allowed to happen.
Brightman Street Bridge. That's been sitting there for a while.
So
Well, we were promised we'd be able to fish, and you can't go on it now.
Right. But the good news is that there was money put into a bond bill, and so the design portion of taking it down has been done. The problem, it's like, I want to say to people, why do you put your nose in things? The National Park Service inserted themselves in the process because they think that would be, the Somerset side anyway, should be a park. Well, that's super, except that, you know who pays for a national park? Not the feds, the local community.
Do they?
Yes. So I think we're at the point where everybody's convinced them that this is not going to happen.
Is that because the scenic river designation?
I think that's
up in
part
Dayton,
of
it's
it.
scenic. Down there, it's
Oh God,
Fall
no.
River.
I know.
Well,
I know.
it's wild and scenic.
Wild. It's wild. That's
Yeah.
the wild part. So yes, it is still, it's in process. The problem is now that, there's so many challenges and there's so many strains on the budget. It's costing $1 million to keep that damn thing up. But it's going to cost even more to take it down. It's like it's the self, it's a circle of angst because it's rusted. You got to bring in this group, you got to bring in that group, you got to do this, you got to do that, blah blah blah. It's going to cost millions to take it down, and yet if you don't take it down, it just gets worse. So the frustration is huge. But now we're in the place of, do we backfill some of the programs that will be underfunded because of the federal issues, or do we take that down? It's just, there's no good answers. There's really no good answers. And every time I drive by there, I just want to scream because it's so ugly. It's so ugly. And it could be nice, but as time goes on, it gets more expensive for it to be nice. And there's good things going on. The family that bought the Slates Ferry is going to now have the Slates Ferry Grill. That bought Magoni's. Work is being done on Slates Ferry Avenue. Things are happening, but there's all of these hurdles that are so frustrating that we seem to not be able to control. So it's hard. It's hard. And if we could get some good companies, then we could ignore help from the state and the feds. Somerset could do it. Fall River could do it. Look at all the good things that are going on in Fall River. As crazy as I get driving down to Wall Street.
Here's the thing, is that Fall River is getting through the Student Opportunity Act around an extra $20 million every fiscal year. Now that ends in the next fiscal year, in FY 2026. And places like Somerset are like, hey, here we are. And the battle as well as I do, is going to be over, are the schools going to get what they want after the Board of Selectmen basically said, everybody's at 2.5. Well, nobody told the school department that, did they?
So, going back to when I was the chair of education, we tweaked the formula at that time. The formula had been based on the 1990 census. So in 1993, when the bill went in, nothing changed. So everyone was being judged on their ability to raise money for the schools based on their people of 1990. In 2005, Bob DeLeo was the chair of Ways and Means, and I said to him, Bob, you're from Revere. You're suffering the same thing that I'm suffering in Somerset. Let me work on this. So we did. And what we did was we changed the formula so that every single community, regardless of who you were or what your zip code was, they were guaranteed that 17.5% of the money coming from the state for their school, 17.5%, that's what you were going to get. And so everybody was like, oh my God, this is great. So we were to phase it in over 5 years. Of course, what happened in 2008? The big recession. So that all stopped. So now there's been these patchworks, Student Opportunity Act, gateway cities and everything. So I had been having conversations with the chairman of Ways and Means going into, at the end of last year, when we saw that the big problem was inflation. And I had said to him, I'll do it again. I'll do all the work. I'll go out to every single community and I'll let people talk to me, which is what I did in 2005. Tell me what your tax rate is. Tell me what your typical retiree lived in. Tell me what blah, blah, blah. Because of that process, what now happens is you're not assigned a factor anymore, that you put into DOR all of your, every 3 years, you reevaluate all your property. That goes into DOR, as well as your W-2 forms. So it's all self-reported information. From that is what the wealth measure became, and that's how the decision was made, just how much you as a community could tax or could expect from your W-2 forms. That needs to be done again because everything's changed. I mean, look at how dramatically Somerset's changed. Look at how dramatically even Fall River has changed. So I was willing to do that again and go through the process of now updating that wealth measure and also looking at inflation. But I'm with you instead of up there, but that's okay. That's okay. But it's going to take. I had Desi working on it with me. I had Ways and Means working on it with me, and I had my own staff working on it with me. And those were all people who knew the formula. So few people know the formula. And I don't know it as well as I used to. I used to know it. But you have to do it every day, and you have to understand that things change, whether you like it or not. And you're right. Fall River is taking on a bigger burden. That has to be addressed. And the people who live in Somerset are not necessarily as well off as they may have been 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Because I moved from Fall River. My father worked at Firestone, and then he worked at the Herald News. So the process that we use for many of these things, and it's because we just don't have enough people, the processes that we use are not able to keep up with the changes that take place. And it is frustrating, and it is what it is. So, you need people who know the process. You need people who are willing to pull together other people who know the process. When we did the redo of the formula, Desi was running the numbers for me every day. So I'd say, what if we change this by 0.5%? What if we change this by population of X? And of course they had the computers and they'd run it. And nobody's got the time to do that because things are so much more complicated. I'm sure you feel the same way. When I was young, I knew everything there was to know because there wasn't as much to know.
That's true.
One last question. What's your future?
My future is I just want to help. And I don't know what my future is. I just know that Somerset is in for a rough ride.
Do you want a rematch?
No. It's, nah. There's no need for that. I can be helpful in other places.
Okay.
And I do believe, though, that the district needs somebody with drive. And I'm not patting myself on the back, but I had a lot of drive.
Yes, you did. And
I was willing to do the work, regardless of whether I had the staff or not. When I did the budget, the formula, I made 23 visits all over the state. When I did the energy, I worked nonstop for months. I'm not sure that exists in enough people. I'm not picking out anyone. I'm just saying that I'm not sure that exists in enough people to make the huge changes, especially in education, that need to be made. A lot of people have to come to the table. A lot of people from Fall River, from Somerset, from Sherborne, Massachusetts, from who knows where, because it's not the same. And you got to be willing to sit down and listen to those rurals and the cities So I don't need a rematch. I need to concentrate on trying to find businesses to come to Somerset. That's kind of what I'm doing.
Very good.
Still talking. Everybody will take my call, and some people who are trying to get away.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I just rattled on and on.
No, that was not rattling. You did a good job. Right.
It's something that I loved, and it's something that I will never say was not worthwhile and is still not worthwhile.
Thank you.
It's a great job. You all should do it.
Thank you so much.